Hello guys, Ryan Ho back with another video. Today we have the Kiwi Ears Ke4. This thing is pretty much hyped because it represents a shift in the tuning of IEMs. Some people call this the new meta tuning. But basically it emphasizes a lot more the mid-range focus. And so you get a lot better kind of vocals in general in this new tuning, and it's pretty much mid-centric versus the older tunings of the Harman Target, which is represented by this Simgot SM4 or Supermix 4. This one is basically one of the best tuned Harman Target IEMs and the Ke4. Some people call it the JM1 tuning that this thing represents, or you can just call it the meta tuning. So yeah, let's kind of compare this new meta tuning that people are saying is the new hype versus the old tuning, which is the Harman Target. Now, I feel like a lot of these tuning things has to do with the fact that they're using better type of tools to measure their IEMs. And so they're getting, I guess, better measurements and more sophisticated measurements. But I would say this new target definitely brings something new to the table. And the funniest thing about it is that I feel like because this new tuning is so much more mid-range centric, it almost makes the Harman Target sound a little V-shaped because it emphasizes the bass and the treble more, and the mid-range kind of take a step back versus this new type of tuning. So let's kind of delve into the details of these two and kind of pick out the differences and see which one I like better or worse. And of course, I want to thank Linsol for sending the Kiwi Ears Ke4 out. So if you're interested in the Ke4 or any of these on the table, for the matter, the Supermix 4 or even the Kiwi Ears Quintet, you guys can pick it up at linsol.com. Now, the other thing is the Quintet is also a Harman tune IEM, but I feel like the Simgot SM4 is a more Harman tune or better tuned version of it, but the Quintet is a more high resolving version of it as well. The Kiwi Ears comes with the classic kind of Kiwi Ears bag. I feel like they use this on every single IEM, and they come with their new tips, right? So this is their new, I guess, purple tips with these little star shapes in the middle. It's a very interesting kind of tip. I mean, taking a look at the shell, it just has that nice brush, almost metal look, but then it has that like shine, and then this kind of like nice, I guess, acrylic kind of coating over it that makes it just look really cool. It has a standard black shell with this, it kind of very, like, I guess, conforms to your ear, so I don't really have an issue with the fitment. It's a little bit bigger than other IEMs, and then their new like custom tips are just honestly really good. These are very comfortable, and yeah, I think these tips are just really good. They're just soft and pliable. And the overall build quality of this, I think, is pretty nice. And then you get this pretty nice cable as well. So I think the Ke4 in terms of accessory is pretty standard from Kiwi Ears, and yeah, not bad. So this is the Ke4, right? So it has 4 different drivers, and it has a double dynamic driver and 2 BA drivers. The double dynamic driver in this is actually really, really good. The double dynamic driver, I feel like the newer just dynamic drivers that have 2 play a lot better, deeper sub bass, and a lot better bass with more quantity, as well as just a lot more dynamics. Like you really feel the bass on this Ke4. It's actually even more, I guess, tactile, or you can more dynamic. You can feel the air move more than even the Simgot SM4. Now, the mid-range of this is played by the BA drivers. I feel like the drivers, honestly, in this are very high quality, but the tuning of this is a little bit interesting compared to the more traditionally tuned IEMs, right? So the bass of this is just very, very, like, there's definitely a lot of bass. And the thing I noticed between the bass and like the vocals or the mid-range, a lot of times I notice that they're very, very kind of close together in this IEM. At least the way it's tuned, it doesn't sound like there's much distinction between the bass and the mid-range. They feel like they're being played like in the same space, and they're almost like overcrowding each other, versus I feel like on the Harman Target or the SM4, it's just a lot more, I guess, distinct between the bass and the mid-range. The vocals, they're just they stand out a lot from each other. And so I feel like that is something I actually like better on the Harman versus the Ke4 is just kind of, they're kind of just fighting for the same space too much in general for the overall tuning of this. And then the Ke4 also has less treble than the Harman Target. So it almost feels like the mid range is being pushed up, and then the treble is a little bit lower, and the bass is about the same, but it almost makes all the sounds sound a little bit more close together, a little bit more compressed versus the the Harman tuning just seems to have a little bit more, I guess, higher highs, right? And so the sound just sounds a lot more dynamic in the sense of like it goes lower and it goes higher, if that makes any sense. While the Ke4 just sounds like it's almost like everything's playing in the same range, same zone, that it almost sounds like almost compressed in that way. So that's a very interesting thing that I noticed when I was comparing these two. So I feel like when it comes to just distinctly like listening to the bass, the mids, the treble, the SM4 really does a better job, in my opinion. Now, the Ke4 really has what, like in comparison to the Harman target, I think a lot of people will consider the Ke4 just to be a kind of a warm type of IEM. So you have less treble, so there's no fatigue, there's no piercing, there's none of that. It's very, very smooth sounding IEM, which I do really like a lot. But sometimes I do miss a lot more of that kind of sparkly or a little bit better treble finishing on it that you get from the Harman tuned Simgot. So I feel like the treble, at least in that area, I give it the Ke4 a plus or a thumbs up for being extra smooth and never harsh, but I think the detail definitely goes to the Harman tuned one. The mid range, I feel like that's the biggest strength of this new tuning. I definitely think the mid range just sounds a lot more present, a lot more forward, a lot more just, I guess, natural, honestly, on the Ke4. So I feel like that's where it does really well. And on the Simgot, it does almost sound V-shaped. It seems like the mid-range is kind of left behind. The bass and the treble seem to be more kind of the center of the show. And it's just weird calling a Harman target IEM V-shaped, but I really do think, like, in comparison, that's really kind of how it sounds, honestly. The bass, I would say between the bass, like I said, this one is just more dynamic. It's more fun. It hits harder. You can feel a lot more. The bass on the Ke4 is just definitely better, but that might not honestly be a Harman tuning type of thing. It's more just like it has better drivers, honestly, and it's more expensive at $200 versus the SM4 is like $150. So, like, really, if you haven't noticed, I do think I like the Harman or the SM4 better in terms of tuning, and then the Ke4, I feel like it does the mid-range well, but I'm just like kind of like lacking the treble. I think it just needs a little bit better treble. I also think it needs a lot more like upper mid-range, or you can call it the presence region. It just feels like the vocals are just slightly more relaxed in that region. They're just slightly pushed back versus the Simgot or the Harman target is just a little bit better at kind of presenting the vocals in a more kind of forward manner. So I do appreciate that a little bit more as well. So in general, if I had to sum up the Ke4, mid-range centric, overly smooth, and a little bit bassy, I would say, like, I definitely do detect almost I want to say a little bit of a muddiness is what people call it. It's like when you're transitioning between the bass and the vocals, like I said, there's not huge distinction between them. They almost like meld together, and there's a little bit of, like, I guess what audiophiles call muddiness, where the bass and the vocals or the lower mid-range, especially the male vocalists, they're almost so close together they sound like they're kind of competing, and they kind of just overly thick bass with the male vocals kind of blend together a little bit, right? So that's the only downside, I think, to this type of tuning. And so, yeah, I mean, the Ke4 is pretty much a nice, smooth, easy to listen to, great mid-range. Like, I actually noticed that, when I was playing games, the soundstage probably about the same between both of them, nothing significantly different, but the imaging was honestly really good. I feel like the Ke4 deserves, like, I don't know, like an 8.5 out of 10 or almost a 9 out of 10 in terms of like detecting your enemies where they are in front of you or on their side. But then the other thing is, I feel like the tuning of this really lends itself to like emphasizing a lot of the footsteps. I feel like they're really easy and clear to listen to on the Ke4. They just seem to be almost the forefront of the sound that you're listening to when you're playing games. So when you're playing like Valorant and stuff, I can definitely hear those footsteps a lot more prominent in comparison to the Simgot SM4. So I feel like in terms of tuning and pushing those forward, I feel like it does a really good job. Now, I didn't really struggle to hear it on the Simgot. I feel like the Simgot is actually kind of clear in the sense of like you can hear the gunshots a little bit more. There's better distinction, but if you're trying to hear the footsteps, they're pretty much more laser focused on the Ke4. But I feel like between the imaging of both of these, I pretty sure I reviewed the Simgot SM4 and said it was kind of like the imaging was okay, but then I switched it to these smaller tips and the imaging improved a lot. I think I got a better kind of, I guess, fit with it with the smaller tips. And I actually think the Simgot had just as good imaging, if not just slightly better than even the Ke4. So honestly, they both perform really well. I don't think there's a difference in terms of competitive games, but the tuning wise, the Ke4 does, like I said, emphasize the most important parts if you're trying to play those competitive games. But if you're trying to play like story games, I'd probably go with the SM4. I think the tuning in general is just more natural sounding to me on this one. This one sounds pretty natural in the mid range, but you're kind of lacking in the treble and the bass. It's just a little bit overly thick, I guess I would say. I feel like that kind of really sums up my thoughts and opinions on this. Between this and Quintet, they're honestly pretty similar in price. The Quintet's a little bit more expensive with its 5 drivers, but I do think the Quintet does sound just noticeably more clean, I guess clear, but it also sounds a little bit more, I guess, fatiguing. The treble on the Quintet definitely is a little bit more emphasized versus the Ke4 really is just a very smooth, relaxing listen to. And it's just very kind of fun, I guess, to listen to. It, like I said, it's just fatigue-free type of sound that I think a lot of people will also enjoy on the Ke4. So I feel like that's also the benefit of that new type of tuning, right? So in conclusion, I probably am still a fan of the Harman, but I feel like if they can add just a little bit more mid-range to the Harman, or they can add more treble to the Ke4, I feel like these two would get closer to each other, honestly, and they sound more similar. So that's probably more where my ideal type of sound would be leaning towards. But yeah, so far I think these two are very good. They're on almost opposite sides of the spectrum in where they kind of emphasize the sound, but definitely recommend each one if you like it or not. But for me, I'm going to pick this one, honestly, number one. Even the Quintet is a more, I guess, technically more impressive than the Simgot Supermix 4. The Supermix 4 actually has just a less, I guess, piercing treble. It's a little bit more controlled, I feel like, on this one. So I do like it a little bit better than that. But, there's always pros and cons to like everything, right? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe down below. Helps my videos out. And I'll see you guys in the next video.